Good morning, my beautiful babes and babettes, just barely. It is 11:58 a.m. I've been writing all morning. I am your resident active advocate, and today I would like to begin my series on disability in children's literature. The first book I would like to discuss is The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. Everyone and their pet moose has read this book, but if you have not read this book but you want to read this book, major spoilers from here on. You have been warned. All right, so I would argue that the main protagonist of this book, Mary Lennox, is not actually disabled, but she is portrayed as having some rather nasty mental health kind of issues. However, the problem of the nuance with her mental health issues is that they are pretty much immediately healed by exposure to the English countryside. Mary had, to that point in her life, been raised in India, which in the book is framed as not being a good climate or place in which a child should grow up because it's too hot, it's too sunny, it's languid, it's stinky, it's full of black people, which is completely historically inaccurate. There are a lot of problems with this book, many of which come from the colonial English mindset that had been in place at the time of this book's composition and much later as well. So the framing device here is that when Mary is brought to England and she encounters her own land and her own people, and people who won't just instinctively kowtow to her every need and desire, because in India they also exploited the hell out of the Varnanas, or the caste system. So all of the people in India had given her her own way for her whole life because both of her parents had just wanted her out of the way. They hadn't wanted to deal with her. And this in her created a sense of moral superiority, but also of extreme loneliness. She never had a friend her own age. She never wanted a friend her own age. She just wanted to be surrounded by slaves who would do her bidding always. One line in this book that I do appreciate comes from the mother of one of the side protagonists. His name is Dickon, and we will get to him. His mother says that the worst thing for a child is either having their own way in everything or having their own way in nothing. And she doesn't know which is the worst for a child. I actually agree with that, but the context in which it is framed is kind of, again, racially and culturally insensitive because of what the English did in India. It was considered the jewel in the crown of the English crown, right? Because it was so full of resources and people that could all be exploited to better and further and enlarge the English Empire. So when Mary goes to England, she also meets her cousin Colin, who is disabled to a certain extent. Much of the problem I have with this book is that people's disabilities are framed as just being all in their head, and if they could just get into the right environment and get all of the happy thoughts into their head and all of the negative thoughts out of their head, then everything would be solved. This is called magic thinking. It is also a staple of what in disability literature is called the cure narrative. You see this in the much more literal sense in the Bible, as I mentioned yesterday, when Jesus can lay his hands on people and cure them of their illnesses. In the Secret Garden, however, several hundred years down the line from the composition of the New Testament, the cure narrative comes in the form of people being exposed to the English countryside and to the wet and to the growth and to the flowers and to the animals and, all of these things that are very natural, very pastoral, very rich and comforting and wholesome. There is evidence, yes, there is evidence to suggest that being out in nature is very good for a person's mental health. However, with Colin, he had to that point believed himself to be incapable of walking as well. He has admitted to Mary and to her new friend Dickon that there's nothing actually wrong with his legs or with his back, as people had been claiming about him for his entire life. He had really just been too afraid to try and walk because his father, and we'll get to the father, had inculcated in his son's head that you are going to be like me. You are going to be a hunchback. The father isn't exactly a hunchback, but he has sort of uneven shoulders. But when it comes to the father as well, he has severe mental health issues that are healed by being in the secret garden. He travels all over Europe looking for some peaceful place to hide himself away and to just be alone and be in the quiet so that he can think his bad thoughts alone by himself. But it turns out the miracle cure for him is to be with his son, the sight of whom he had despised up to that point because he had known, quotation marks, that his son was going to be ill and probably not live to be an adult and all of these awful things that he had thought. But then at the end of the book, he goes home and he sees that Colin through exposure to the secret garden as well, and he can run and all of this stuff of which he had not been capable only a few months earlier. Again, this is magical thinking, and there is a link, yes, between your mental state and your physical health, but it's not going to be cured that easily or that quickly. A lot of the time in the real world, you'll need actual medical help to get over these sorts of mind-body connection issues. I'm trying to remember the word for it. Oh, psychosomatic. Okay, that's the word. These are called psychosomatic issues, the mind affecting the body. In the case of all three of these characters, their quote savior is embodied in the character of Dickon, who is a country boy. He's always been out in nature, out with the animals. He can confer with animals, makes friends with them all the time, and they trust him implicitly. He's basically this book's manifestation of God or of the angels because everything and everyone trusts him automatically. And he's good for everyone's mental health and for everyone's physical health. And it's just this one person, apparently, for everyone, who needed to be in the picture for them all to get better. So when it comes to Dickon, he helps to, quote, cure both Mary and Colin by having them out in the secret garden to dig and to play with the animals and to talk and, to make things and watch things come alive. But then when the father gets home and sees that Colin is well, that's also a side effect of what Dickon had done. So Dickon was also instrumental in the father getting his mental health back. The problem with this book, as I say, is that it's just too easy. And tomorrow, I would like to have a very similar conversation again about the book Heidi, which I will be addressing because it's even more ridiculous than The Secret Garden. I encourage you, if you have not read this book, to read this book, but I want you to read it with a critical eye towards both ableism, which is it's discrimination against people with disabilities, ableism, and implicit racism and classism. Okay, those are the three big no-nos in that book, in my eye. So that is my analysis of The Secret Garden and what it does right and what it does wrong. There's a lot more that it does wrong than it does right. It does do some things right, but not all. And I will see y'all tomorrow to have, as I say, a very similar conversation about the book Heidi. All right, have a good day and be happy. Get out in nature if you can and if it's not too cold. Love y'all. Bye. Mwah.